think we should get started. It looks like there's a whole bunch of people who have come in, which is excellent. As we're going throughout today, if you have any questions, fire them into the Q&A, and we'll do our best to answer them as we're going. And we'll also have some time at the end to answer any questions. So don't hold back. So today we're talking about three technologies that kind of work together to help submarine cable companies and subsea asset companies kind of monitor and manage their assets in three different periods, I guess. One is thinking about where to lay a cable and conducting that kind of planning. One is the monitoring and protection of the cables once they're in place. And then lastly, talking a little bit about using these technologies to review incidents and hopefully understand what happened and prevent them from happening in future. But before we jump into all of that, just a couple of introductions. My name is Andy Hovey. I'm the Chief Product Officer here at Starboard Maritime Intelligence. We make maritime domain awareness software that's used every day by customers around the globe, including some submarine cable companies. And I'm going to hand over to Partha, who's here today to introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Partha, and I am the pre-sales engineer in Planet in APAC or Asia Pacific region. So my responsibility in this company is to demonstrate the techno-commercial values of Planet solution before the user. Last 20 years, I'm on the industry, specifically in remote sensing and in hyperspectral and SAR interferometry. So that's the thing. So hand over to Jim.
And hi, everybody. Jim Thomason from Saildrone. I am the Vice President of Product and Strategy here. And yeah, pleasure to be here and chat a little bit about some of what Saildrone is up to and working into the overall capability for good, solid maritime domain awareness and mapping of our oceans.
Cool. Thanks very much, Partha and Jim. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing in Starboard and show some Planet data in here, and then hand over to Partha and Jim a bit later on to kind of go into more detail about these sensors and how they kind of work in a complementary way. So what you're looking at here is Starboard. This is the software that we produce, and just a very brief overview of how this works. Everything that you're looking at on screen responds to the filters that we've got set across the top of the screen here, and you can analyze and move see any movement through time down the bottom. And so when cable companies are thinking about where to lay their cables or thinking about the location of cables, traditionally a great way of understanding potential risks is looking at the traffic that's in the area, and particularly the type of maritime traffic that could present a risk. Often those risks are presented by very large vessels that could be anchoring, particularly dragging anchor, or risks presented by fishing vessels, and particularly fishing vessels that have gear that can be deep in the ocean, which could be longliners with very long lines, or trawling vessels and other types, for example. And so what we're looking at here in Starboard is this kind of historical analysis. So I'm looking at 6 months or so in 2021, and I'm actually looking at all of the vessels that have passed through. There's a tiny little area down here off Perth, and I can see on my screen there's 853 total vessels that have been in that area over those 6 months. But looking at the vessels that might be of interest to us, for example, the very large vessels, I can add a filter to go, just give me the vessels that are over 300 meters in length. And then it's going to go away and have a look at all of those vessels. And this is kind of a good indication to go, of all of the vessels that are coming into this area, which ones are the ones that are going to have the longest anchor lines, the heaviest anchor, and particularly are going to be collecting wind from, for example, a strong westerly. So I can see here it's returned a result set of those 853 filters. There are 26 vessels that are very large in that area. And this is kind of a quick way of going, what is the size of these vessels? How would this influence the location of the cables that we may lay? The other potential risk I talked about is the type of vessel. So if I look at vessel type here, I can say, just give me the fishing vessels, for example, and it'll go away and say, these are all of the fishing vessels in the area. And again, I can see where these vessels are coming from and the nature of their kind of patterns of life, if you like. And I can turn these on and off. And I can see, for example, there are a bunch of longliners that behave primarily domestically with some international movement. So this is a really kind of quick way of starting to analyze the vessels and the potential risks that might impact a cable in its location. I'm going to cut to another example or essentially zoom into this area at the end of the time frame to discuss a specific use case. So we're looking at the same area here, but this is zoomed right in, and it's this green area here is around a cable coming into Perth. And in this case here, I've got the filters across the top of the screen, but I've added on this vessel activity loitering. And so this is essentially vessels that are moving very slowly. And this, you can see, if I move the vessels back and forth through time, there are a number that have moved over and above the cable area. And you can see on the left-hand side here, I've got some additional information. I've got some optical satellite data and a type of satellite data called radar data. I'll talk briefly about this optical image. This actually comes from Planet that Partha is going to talk a whole lot more about soon. If I zoom in here, you can see, for example, I get a little more information. This vessel is self-reporting its location on AIS, probably a data set many of you are familiar with. And I can also see a little context, given the resolution of the satellite data, that the sea state is a bit rough. This can be particularly valuable when you want to have a complete picture of vessels in the area and you're kind of understanding those who are reporting and not reporting their location. I want to dig in a little bit more to this vessel in particular. So I'm going to hide the other vessels here. And I want to talk about what this vessel is up to and the speed that it's moving. So the colored track I've actually turned on to tell me the speed of the vessel and give me a bit of an idea of what's going on. And I can see that by moving through time, this vessel looks like it was at anchor just outside the protection zone. And then it's moving back and forth a little bit. And then it actually drags anchor and it moves into the cable protection zone. And so to provide a little bit of information about what's going on, remember this is a huge vessel we're dealing with, 332 meters long. We can turn on the oceanographic layers and we can see that there's a ripping westerly coming forward, which is pushing against that vessel. And unfortunately, what happened in this vessel's case is that it did actually drag anchor and it caused $1.5 million of damage to that cable. And then the captain was prosecuted, or taken to court, rather. I want to cut to a quick example before we go a little bit further into looking at the Planet data, because the example I just showed was using the analysis of vessel movements with AIS data, and that's really powerful, and a little bit about adding information in with the optical data. In some cases, the optical data is essential to tell you what's happening. In this case here, it's optical data working with algorithms and AIS data to identify a potential risk before it could happen. So you'll see on my screen, it's another vessel. And there's a number of algorithms that are running that has flagged this unusual movement in Starboard with the colors and the icons here. And this vessel moves through time. And then actually this vessel is noted by the dotted outline, stops reporting its location. And it actually goes off AIS altogether. But what we can see in the Planet data is this vessel continues heading north, and we can identify the location of this vessel in the optical Planet data. So I'm going to hand over to Partha to continue talking a bit about optical data and pick up that story in particular.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, so before I come back to this ship RUBYMAR thing, I would like to start with the mission statement of Planet. And actually, very frequently we get this question: what is the unique about Planet? What makes Planet so unique? And our simple answer is that is our mission statement. That is to image the whole world every day and make global change visible, accessible, and actionable. And this is not only the mission statement, actually we are doing the same. In next slide, we'll see. So we are operating the largest constellation of satellite. We have around 200 number of small satellite, dome satellites, and which we are using to capture the whole Earth surface, specifically land mass on daily basis. Whole land mass we are capturing daily. So using our dome satellite in 3-meter pixel size. All imagery is ortho-rectified and atmospherically corrected imagery we can deliver. And at the same time, we are operating another constellation, that is SkySat. We have 21 number of SkySat. And one group of SkySat satellite is running on the sun-synchronous orbit with 2 passing time, afternoon and morning. And we have another group of satellite which are running on the inclined orbit. So as a combination of both, we are getting a very high revisit. In the next slide, we'll see so how this 2 satellite looks like. Particularly 3-meter satellite, 3-meter imagery, 3-meter pixel size, which is visible in the left side, which is, we call it as always on satellite. We are capturing the whole Earth surface on daily basis. And particularly for broad area monitoring, that is the product of choice, every day, everywhere. And in the right side is the, if I need something more, I want to get some more details about my point of interest. In that case, we can on demand, we can just go for the SkySat. And that is on demand satellite, on demand imagery that we can get. This is the 50-centimeter satellite. So this is left side is the PlanetScope 3-meter that is always on, and right side is the SkySat of the same area where we get the more details about my object. In the next slide, we'll just come to the same use case which Andy has referred, that is the ship RUBYMAR. Actually, the ship RUBYMAR was sent the last signal from this junction of Red Sea and Gulf of Aden. Exact location Andy has already demonstrated to you. And on 18th February in the evening, that particular ship sent the last AIS signal. After that, it was not a signal. From the news, reason of these things is something different. But what happens? The ship is sinking, ship has sunk, and as a result, what happened? It has damaged the 3 major subsea cable in the Gulf of Aden, which was connecting Africa, India, and Europe. So that cable was damaged. That is visible from the news. In the next slide, we'll see. So when RUBYMAR sent the last signal on 18th February evening, and as Planet, we are capturing the imagery daily. Here we can see the location. That particular imagery is showing. So 19th morning, we got the imagery and it is showing. The imagery is visible here. Ship is visible here. Now, as I mentioned, we are operating 2 constellations of satellite. One is PlanetScope, 3-meter pixel size. Another one is SkySat, that is on demand. When something is happened here, I need something more details about my point of interest. At this point of time, my point of interest is this ship RUBYMAR. So we have ordered the SkySat satellite. This is 19th February. In the next slide, we'll see the higher resolution 50-centimeter SkySat satellite of ship RUBYMAR. And from this satellite now, the whale spill is visible. The massive whale spill happens from the ship RUBYMAR, that is visible. So that is showing that is because of the damage of the ship, the whale spill is happening. And next few days, we just keep continued our tracking of the ship. In the next slide, you'll see, and ultimately it is found that in the 28th February, the poop deck is submerged already, and bow of the ship is in the raised condition. And we can see that some rescue ship are also visible here in the left side graphic on 18th February. And ultimately, although ship is moved slightly in the northern part of the Red Sea, but ultimately 9th April imagery is showing ship is sinking. And probably this is one of the reasons for the damage of the undersea cable in the Red Sea. In the next slide, next we'll see one more use cases that is also different kind of use cases that where in the Baltic Sea area, undersea pipeline, gas pipeline has been damaged a lot. Probable reason is the movement of the ship or dragging of anchor or movement of some submarine. So maybe some sabotage also. That is for all these things are coming from the news. Now from the planet imagery, it is found that 3 different locations, the gas, next slide we'll see, in the next 3 different location has been identified and all are visible in the planet imagery. You can see the gas leak is happening and which is visible in the upper surface of the water. Water bubbles are visible here. So that's the way planet imagery, daily imagery, as well as the SkySat imagery can help the user to identify if there is any subsea damage or subsea cable damage or pipe damage, or that's the kind of things, particularly in maritime domain. So planet imagery may be the game changer to monitor the assets related to maritime domain. High resolution as well as the 3 meter, both are available on demand basis. Particularly for tracking, not only the tracking of the assets, ships, or sometime it may happen some illegal transfer, ship-to-ship transfer, that also can be monitored, that also can be identified using planet imagery also. To telling this, I'd like to hand over to Jim for the next part. Jim.
Great. Thanks, Partha. We've started by looking at kind of the global scale of these various cable routes that are really critical infrastructure for our modern life, and monitoring that with a good common operating picture. Starboard is built, and then with Planet's capabilities to do a kind of broad area surveillance from space is critical. But what Saildrone is providing is that next level of detail. So we build and operate a global fleet of unmanned surface vehicles that are primarily sail powered. You see one of our newest ones here in this video. And these are amazing, persistent sensor platforms to really enhance your understanding of the maritime domain. And that could fall within your initial surveying of a cable route, but you can also use that to follow up and look at damage. So I'll dig into a few details here. Next slide, please. It's a really good video, though. We're seeing at least twice. Yeah, so a little bit more about what we do. So we, as I mentioned, we have a global fleet of uncrewed surface vehicles, 3 different classes. I'll go into some details later, but we operate all around the world. We have done missions from Antarctica, around the Pacific, the Atlantic, every major sea around the world, throughout Asia, as well as North and South America. So it's a growing fleet. We continue to build more. And I think it's important to understand that these vessels are really exciting to talk about, and they're pretty amazing technology, but it's the capability that they unlock, and it's the additional ability to have persistent sensing, persistent monitoring of these hotspots that you've identified, either through ship traffic in a tool like Starboard, or through Planet's monitoring imagery. We can then provide that next step of really understanding what is happening both on the surface of the water as well as underneath. Next slide. As I mentioned, we can host any number of sensors on these vehicles. So whether it's on or above the surface of the water, we can provide both scientific as well as atmospheric sensors. We certainly carry a host of high-powered radar capabilities in order to see vessels around the surface. We have very good high-resolution pan-tilt zoom cameras. And all of these sensors are both collecting data as well as running through our algorithms on board the vessel to get real-time understanding of what we are sensing and what we are seeing on the water. But in addition to that, we can also monitor subsea environment. So we have a host of sonar and acoustic arrays that we can tow or mount on our vehicles. And these are used to really better understand existing environment underneath the ocean and understanding the topography and understanding the bathymetry of these environments where we're perhaps routing a cable. But also in an example like we looked at earlier, you could go back and assess the damage with an uncrewed vessel before you have to get kind of a large crewed surface survey vehicle out there to really understand what's going on. And as I mentioned, having all this sensor data is really only as good as your ability to look at it and understand it. So in preparation for this, Andy and I got together and kind of quickly exchanged a few files from Saildrone's API, and we're able to ingest it directly into Starboard's platform. So this is just another kind of way that we try to make our data as easy to consume and as easy to integrate into whatever platform you're using to monitor your infrastructure. We give you this, data set that has not been accessible to you anywhere else in the world. And we just want to make that as easy as possible for you to consume and use and get value from in real time. And finally, just a little bit about our three vessels. It's hard not to talk about the boats. They're awesome. We started with our Explorer. This is a 10-plus-year-old design, and these things will go out and explore any part of the ocean. We've had them out on mission for over a year at a time, and they carry a whole host of sensors for both science and mapping missions. The next class up is our Voyager. This is a 10-meter hull. And this carries an even more powerful set of sensors. So both the ability to map and understand the subsea environment, but also to carry a host of high-powered radar and camera systems to help see what's up on the surface. And then our most kind of capable vehicle is the 20-meter Surveyor class. And this is, we just came out with our next generation of Surveyor. We just splashed it a few weeks ago, and this is a massive vehicle and can carry really high precision, highly accurate, and really high-powered host of sensor payloads. So this is where you can get really impressive sensing capabilities, kind of regardless of your use case, but especially for deep sea cable routes, understanding and being able to get more insight into what's happening before and after an event, or to provide surveillance and persistent monitoring of hotspots where you're concerned about what might be happening. So those are our vehicles, and a little bit about some of the sensing that we can provide kind of at the end of this use case that we've talked through, where you have this global view and you can zoom in with optical or radar imagery, and then you can get that kind of last mile under the clouds, under the ocean sensing using our uncrewed vehicles. So I will hand it back to you, Andy.
Cool. Thanks very much, Partha and Jim. That's great. Was going to open up to anyone who has any more questions. I see there's just one come through there. Jim, that's probably a good one for you. Talking about multibeam GPS combination for seabed mapping.
Yes, it is. It is. I mean, we use some of the best sensors in the industry, and we can map all the way down to essentially full ocean depth with our multi-beam sensors. So as I mentioned, the Surveyor vehicle is really a way to enhance the global fleet of survey ships. We feel like there's a vast majority of the mapping that is happening through these, massive and very scarce crewed survey ships. A lot of that mapping we could take over with uncrewed vehicles and get, a tremendous amount of value. So.
Cool. I think a follow-up question there too about the operation in ice-infested waters. I know that the Saildrones have been to some pretty extreme environments from our previous discussions.
Yeah, we have been all around the continent of Antarctica. We've surveyed the whole area. We also run a hurricane mission with NOAA as one of our longest customers. And we've been doing that survey or that hurricane mission, every year. So a few ice chunks is not a problem. But that said, we also have some collision avoidance on board. So if we do see a big chunk of ice, we certainly try to avoid it if we can. But yeah, they're pretty rugged vehicles, and they're designed to operate in everything the ocean has to throw at them.
There's a question in there from Thomas about the next maritime awareness technology frontier emerging, which is a really excellent question, and I think we could probably all have a bit of a stab at that. I might hand over to Partha first, and then come back and talk a little bit about it from the monitoring perspective.
Particularly in maritime awareness domain, Planet, we are known for the high resolution and high frequent imagery provider. So yes, that will just keep continue. At this point of time, we are operating 3-meter resolution daily and sub-daily, maybe our on-demand sub-daily maybe 4 to 5 times, 7 times kind of things. We are coming up with our follow-up mission, that is Pelican. So that Pelican satellite will be 30 centimeter, more details information, and it will be total 30 number of satellite. In every 30 minutes, there will be a revisit. So 30 centimeter resolution satellite, 30 revisit per day, and every 30 minutes, there will be a satellite imagery. That's the kind of technology we are bringing. At the same time, one of the major challenge of maritime domain, as per my knowledge, is the classification of sea. If AIS is there, that is one thing, and if AIS is not there, in that case, classification of the sea. So we are working with various partners, so particularly to come up with some solution where classification of the ship, including the ship number, name, and all these things. So that is the automated kind of classification things that we are coming up with from Planet. Andy.
Yeah, cool. It's a great question. I think that increased understanding, more sensors along the lines of what we've talked about from Planet and Saildrone are providing a kind of a richer understanding and more persistent monitoring in areas of interest, particularly like what Partha talked about with AIS being off or dark on AIS. Like all industries, I think that pervasive internet will change, and I think that perhaps even AIS over time and how that's delivered will be changed with all vessels everywhere having internet all the time, and all the kind of reporting of locations that we've seen come off the back of that. And so there's essentially a bunch more remote sensing, which is going to give us more information about activity and how that activity, in the case of this webinar, kind of influences subsea cables. I think will be a huge area. And then on the kind of machine learning and the analysis and the data analysis side, which is kind of where Starboard plays, with that increasing data, there'll be more algorithms to identify events that are critical to customers. For example, vessels that are more likely to drag anchor either due to historic patterns, current oceanographic conditions, and combining that sort of pattern analysis with sensor information, for example, from Saildrone and whatnot. So the kind of summary of those technological advancements we see is essentially better information for companies like asset monitoring, and hopefully more timely information, so you can see that there is potentially an incident coming up that you can act upon. And just while I'm talking there was another question about additional data integrated into the Starboard product, and so within the Starboard product, there is a whole lot of information that comes out of the box, including global real-time AIS information about all of the ownership and vessel details of a hull, information for 15 different regional fishery management organizations, but then additional information like we've talked about here with Planet and Saildrone, and then customers can bring their own data into the platform. And so that can be things like, for example, simple things like the area that we showed of Perth, or potentially more complex things relevant to them, like previous incidents that give them an understanding of their area of interest. I might hand over to Jim. Do you want to talk any more about the kind of the emerging tech and MDA?
Yeah, I would only add that there's an orchestration layer to all of this that I think is really critical, and something that a lot of clever algorithms and some of the work in AI and machine learning is going to help us with, because as we have this proliferation of sensors and new capabilities, it becomes difficult to really leverage them as efficiently as possible. So if you want this capability to bring the best that space-based remote sensing gives you with the best that surface sensing gives you and the best that aerial and subsea can provide based on your specific need, those are kind of hard choices to make in order to operate in a fairly complex environment like that. And so having some orchestration like what exists within the Starboard platform and a lot of the additional kind of machine learning and AI approaches that are coming down the pipe is, I think, where all of these things will come together, and it will avoid the data overload that sometimes like too many sensors can give you. It will help us kind of transform all that data, all those sensors into actionable insights that we can use and act on. How do we recover a drone stuck in ice? I like that. I mean, first, we don't want to get stuck in ice. But if we do get a drone that gets into a world of hurt, these are all, shippable vehicle sizes. So we can go and recover them. We can use a crewed vessel from kind of any port in the world. We have a whole global operations team that goes out to do maintenance and service and recoveries. But yeah, as rarely as we possibly can is how we like to recover our boats. We tend to prefer, sailing them home or sailing them to a port where we are doing some maintenance or service and getting them all fixed up and send them back out on their way. Any Saildrone has been hijacked. I believe there's a public story about a country that picked up a couple of our drones a few years ago. And it was pretty uneventful, all things considered. It sounds really cool, but the reality is there really isn't much that anyone can do if they pick one of these things up. Everything is encrypted and secured. So we're also with our communications, we're able to offboard all the data, and make sure that we have it and it's secure and safe. So other than some interesting headlines and some funny pictures, we ended up getting the boats back, and everything is in the past now.
Oh, there are a couple of other, maybe we'll answer these couple of questions. If you do have any others, we'll pop them in. Yeah, let's answer these two. What are the biggest risks to maritime domain awareness technologies? Yeah, that's a really good question. I guess that from a monitoring perspective, and what we're talking about here today and what I showed at the start is based on AIS, and AIS is picked up from sort of three primary different methods. And so in Starboard, we use all three. One of those is satellite based. And so there's sensors on the satellites that pick up the locations of the vessels. One of those is terrestrial based. And so there's a network, thousands of sensors around the coast that pick up locations. And the other one is sensors on vessels. And so I guess the same risks apply to that infrastructure that apply to all other infrastructure. There can be risks to satellites through sabotage. There can be risk to the terrestrial receivers. And there can be issues simply through corrupt data and issues happening with those terrestrial receivers. One of the things that Starboard does is a huge amount of work to identify and filter out corrupt data, and make sure that one degrading terrestrial receiver somewhere in the world doesn't dramatically impact the data that customers are seeing in Starboard. And so that kind of from an AIS perspective is probably one of the biggest risks. And I know that recently with the solar storm, that presented some questions for some satellite companies. I don't know, Jim and Partha, if you want to comment on that from a risk perspective.
I would say for us it is weather is far and away the thing that is sometimes difficult, and it becomes about not just weather kind of above the surface, but also making sure that we have good environments for the sensors that we're using. And so that's part of the reason why having kind of persistent, always on sensors gives us that good view of the environment, whether it's the water column or whether it's conditions above the surface, ensuring that we understand as much as we can so that we know which sensors are going to be most accurate, most valuable for the use case that we're after. I think pirates and other conflicts at sea are probably the more fun ones to talk about, but the reality is we don't run into too many issues with that. I mean, these are pretty large vessels, and no one wants to come alongside and try to do anything with them.
There's a question about the integration of data into Starboard. So certainly with Planet data, actually, there are operations going on this week with the integration of Planet and Starboard for different customers in other areas. And that includes some more analysis and vessel detection and other things that I didn't really talk about today. In terms of the integration of Saildrone and Starboard, as Jim said, we've had some sort of initial conversation, had some discussion about how that data would be shared. But that's not streaming in for customers at this stage. But certainly that's kind of a part of discussing this today. And yeah, we're obviously keen to discuss that with customers and make that a reality. I think when the questions come in and say thanks, that's probably a good time to call it. Thanks everyone for dialing in. Yeah, this was a pretty sort of brief overview to talk about how these technologies work together to support subsea infrastructure, submarine cable companies, kind of right from the where should the cable go, how do we monitor and protect it, and then unfortunately if there's an incident, how do we review it, how do we assess the damage, and then ideally how do we make sure that doesn't happen again. And yeah, you can follow up either with us directly, which you'll have our contact details, Starboard contact details because of this webinar. And then, yeah, we can put you in touch with the right folks at Planet and Saildrone also. Thanks very much for joining the call today.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.